Joining me now, Sky News Political Editor Andrew Clennell in Canberra. Andrew, take us through some of the detail here, because I'm interested in the dynamic too. Much has been made of this, bromance relationship sort of thing. I don't know what you call it when it's not romantic in any way. Professional relationship between Sally McManus and the Attorney General, but it's sort of squeezed out the Labor Party because he's negotiating directly through her, and they've made some real ground to the point that the legislation will pass the Parliament likely.
Yeah, it's a very good point you make there, Peter. Essentially, the government's quite deliberately done that, I suspect, gone around the Labor Party, not sat down with Albo and co, and had Porter deal with Sally McManus direct. I mean, Sally McManus has tweeted tonight. She says we've got some things we want, other things we wanted we haven't got. But everyone knows how important it is for this country to have this legislation pass, and so it will pass. Labor will amend a few things. The government will vote that down, and it should go through tomorrow evening. And it will mean a lot of people who would be in Centrelink queues will still be tied to their employers. 6 million, the government says.
Yeah, look, I agree with what they're doing. I agree with the nexus between the employer and the employee being maintained through this hibernation period, the government call it. But, it still beggars belief that 65% of casuals who will be inside this scheme will get more money from taxpayers under this scheme for the next 6 months period than they would if they were ordinarily doing their job. And for everybody else, even those on average earnings in this country, they will take home half, and they've still got to pay tax on what they take home, but they'll be taking home half of what they would normally under average earnings. So there will be a lot of people, particularly families, those with mortgages, who are really going to do it tough, regardless of this payment for the next 6 months.
Yeah, there's two big inconsistencies here. The first is the one you speak of, where a 17-year-old who's only working a few hours a week suddenly finds themselves on an annual salary of 37 grand, which is kind of wrong, or is wrong. And the other one, which I believe is wrong, is this situation where businesses who have a turnover of $1 billion or more have to show a 50% decline in that turnover. Smaller businesses have to show a 30% decline. So, I mean, I'll put that to the PM today. I don't think it's right. If you're a stood-down worker, you're a stood-down worker. What difference does it make if you work for Qantas or you work for the corner store? That's the distinction he makes. That's not the worker's fault. And as a result, you'll see a lot of people just laid off over the next month, I reckon, because of that distinction. And really, realistically, I don't see why the government didn't include those people, Peter, because the Centrelink coronavirus payment is $550 after tax, and you can get rent assistance of $60. After tax, this is $632. So they're probably going to end up paying a lot of that money anyway. I just don't understand the first point you make around the casuals who don't work many hours, and this point as well. I think, they had to pull it together quickly. I understand all that. They had to pull it through existing payment systems, but that is a glaring inconsistency that in the next few weeks will become the subject of some commentary, I believe.
Well, I think that someone should be smart enough to move amendments and rectify it tomorrow, because it's certainly not the distinction that's drawn in markets overseas. We know in the United Kingdom, regardless of what you earn, you will get 80% of it under their regime. In New Zealand, there isn't this distinction. And at the other end of this, the big engine room of the economy is big business, and the sooner we can get big business
100%.
back working, the sooner we can all start paying taxes, and the taxes go into paying back this $1.5 trillion debt, which we'll all be left with, and grandchildren and children after that. Hey, I want to ask you about Boris Johnson, because it's really fascinating. I was watching closely. I watch British television at night to get sort of their feed on it, their take on it. All along it was mild symptoms. He was doing okay. He was just in isolation, more for the benefit of looking after everybody else in Downing Street, they say, than his own condition. But he's really taken a turn in the last couple of days. He went into hospital, they said yesterday, for tests. Now they've been forced to admit he's in intensive care. Do we know any more?
No, well, I mean, we're just relying on the British reports, aren't they? And officially he's not on a ventilator yet, and let's pray it doesn't get to that. I mean, Boris Johnson, his stance in the UK has been very popular. He's been quite strong through this. maybe a few missteps at the start, but he's done things like the wage subsidy. He's been an important figure and leader over there. And the last thing we want is his health condition getting worse. I mean, that's a bad thing for Britain and the world, and you can only wish him all the best, I guess. But I mean, it again underlines and illustrates why we're in the drastic social distancing measures that we are, Peter. If anyone's in any doubt, this guy, you know, people say, and even in government they occasionally, gosh, should we just have all the 70-year-olds, 70-plus-year-olds stay inside? And Boris Johnson actually tried that, didn't work. This guy's 55, pretty healthy, would work a lot of hours a day. He's in intensive care. That's why this virus is so dangerous.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that others that were infected at the same time, presumably, are likely from the same source, have recovered very well. They're back in their suits, they're in front of cameras, and he's in such a bad way. So it's very indiscriminate, and I think it'll be something that people watch very closely in the UK. They don't have a formal, in ordinary time, in any event, a formal Deputy Prime Minister. So Dominic Raab is stepping up to act in an acting sort of arrangement, loosely as they call it over there, for the Prime Minister. So we'll watch it all closely.